Mr. President, I rise in support of Senate Bill 130, which I am proud to co-sponsor. This legislation would ensure that healthcare providers treat babies born alive after failed abortion attempts with the same care they would treat any other baby born at the same stage of pregnancy. And I also want to thank the senator from Nebraska for his leadership on this issue and for bringing this issue to the floor. You know, in one sense, it's very hard to imagine that this legislation is even necessary. In the United States of America, in the 21st century, when every day new advanced technologies bring new revelations about the wonders of human life, it is hard to fathom the extremism, the politicians in New York and now Virginia who would deny the protections of law to the most vulnerable members of our society, the innocent unborn, and allow them to be aborted, allowed them to be killed right up to the moment of birth. It is hard to comprehend statements like those of Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who said that if he had his way, infants who survived abortion attempts would be delivered and kept comfortable, that's his phrase, kept comfortable, while the doctor and the parents decided her fate. Is this really what it has come to in the United States? Is this really the social vision of today's Democrat Party? Because frankly, I can't imagine a vision less just or less consistent with the goodness and compassion of the American people. But in another sense, Mr. President, perhaps we should not be so surprised. After all, the cruelty and extremism advocated by a growing number of Democrat politicians was the conventional wisdom for much of recorded history. We often hail the ancient Greeks as the founders of democracy, but of course, most of the Greeks believed that most humans were born to be slaves and that their lives were utterly worthless. Oh, they had a democracy, of course, but it was the democracy of the few ruling over the many. Romans took the same view. They kept most of their subjects in chains. They infamously killed children they didn't want, leaving them to be exposed on hillsides or desert places. Romans had a republic, but citizenship was for the few. The strong ruled. Most lives, they thought, didn't matter. This has been the general rule of the ages. The Aztecs, Maya, Inca, all practiced child sacrifice. Archaeologists recently discovered a burial ground dated to the Chimu Empire in Peru where more than 140 children were dismembered in a ritual of sacrifice. And so it has gone down through the years. The strong prey upon the weak, the few rule the many, individual lives don't count. But Mr. President, we here in the United States of America hold to a different conviction. Our Constitution was written. The whole edifice of American liberty depends on a very different belief, a belief as simple as it is powerful, that every life matters. We believe, and it is our pride to believe, that every person has dignity and worth that is not given to them by the strong or the rich, that does not come to them from the state or the city, that does not depend on place of birth or social status, but is theirs by right because of who they are. Human beings created in the image of the living God. That is our faith. And against the drift of history, it is a revolutionary creed. It is a creed that inspired the early Christians to rescue those infants the Romans left to die and bring them up to be free. It led them to found hospitals and schools and later universities on the supposition that all people should be cared for, that all can learn, that all can govern themselves. It is a creed that has brought down empires and raised up the forgotten. It is the faith of our Constitution and of our whole way of life. And yes, we have struggled to realize it in this nation. We have struggled to make it real. We have fallen short many times. But this struggle for this faith defines our history and binds us together as Americans. And this faith is again at issue in our time. Now, I know some are tempted when they see this rising tide of barbarism and cruelty to feel despair. But I am not. I think of the words of Lincoln, who spoke of the unfinished work of this nation. And I take courage that all these years later, we are a revolutionary nation still. So we must press forward in this generation for our revolutionary faith. Let us not go back to the darkness and cruelty of the past. Let us not go back to the arbitrary rule of the powerful and the few. Let us affirm again our founding belief in the equal worth and equal dignity of all. And as we do, Mr. President, we will do our part for liberty and justice in our day. I yield the floor.